Good to go.
No need? Okay, we'll continue. Robin? Item number 5 is the operating budget overview for 14-15. Morning, Robin.
We prepared a written summary for you that reflects the documentation that we had given to you in terms of the final approval of the operating budget before the inclusion of it in the Budget Act back in November, so that's in the written documentation. I have a presentation today that presents a different view of the budget in terms of the controls that we're putting in place over inflows and outflows of resources using our new tool, BD. But before I get into either thing, I want to take the time to call out a few staff who have been instrumental. We're in the midst of our year-end carry forward and setup for fiscal year 14-15. And at this point in time, we're truly understanding the benefits of BD and our ability to load a budget in a way that will provide the controls over both revenues and expenses. And people have been working very hard to make that happen. This presentation is driven out of numbers that are actually in our system rather than things that we're holding on Excel spreadsheets, so they will be actually usable for automated controls. And so I just wanted you to appreciate the level of effort that has gone into making that workable and the fact that you're seeing those outputs today. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Brian Fansler, who's the manager in our budget group, and then helping with Brian in terms of directing the implementation of this is Art Martinez, who's actually the Assistant Director of Accounting, but who has worked diligently with the budget staff to make sure that the budget information and the accounting information tie together and can be reflected accurately in our financial reporting. And then there's a staff member in the back, Michelle Marine, without whom you wouldn't have a presentation, who has really worked hard to pull this information together from the system, making sure it's in there accurately and then presentable to you in a way that I hope you can appreciate. So I just wanted to make sure that we recognize those efforts. And I'm very excited about this. This is, you know, we've been working really hard and had lots of troughs and valleys in our experience with the system, but this is the realization of the benefits. And so I hope you'll share the enthusiasm that I have for the information that I'm providing in the presentation. But before I get there, I didn't know if there were questions about the actual operating budget document. As Chris inferred, we are adding 39 positions. 11 of those, I believe, are in the investment arena for this next fiscal year, and we're talking about additional positions as we plan for the 15-16 augmentations. So, but I didn't know if there were any other questions you guys had on the budget as we're rolling into this year with an on-time budget and additional funding. So this presentation really takes a different view of the budget and really reflects the kind of budgetary controls that we're using. It is a presentation by fund. So we're first going to look at the Teachers Retirement Fund, and then we're going to look at the Deferred Compensation Fund, and then we're going to look at, which includes Pension 2, and then we're going to look at the Health Benefits Fund. And you'll see where we are from a inflows and outflows of resources. This isn't strictly a cash presentation because we do include unrealized gains and losses in terms of investment returns in the inflows numbers, so I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. But what this shows you for the State Teachers Retirement Plan is the inflows of resources that we're expecting for the year, and we will have controls around those numbers, what I'll call revenue numbers, even though they're a combination of revenues and reimbursements and abatements. Those kinds of things are in there, and unrealized gains and losses. But we want to make sure that we have a structure to say what our expectations are so that we can understand if we're deviating from those expectations and either validate that that's the result of changing circumstances, or if there is a problem, have an early warning system to help us unwind that. So you'll see the various classifications of inbound flows to the system. Our expenses going out, so the external investment expenses, the operational budget and benefit payments. And again, these are at a roll-up level, so we certainly have more detail underneath them. But that's showing an estimated net inflow overall of $19.9 billion. About $12 billion of that in our calculations are unrealized gains and losses. So that's not the cash flow, that's the actual net gain over the budgetary period. So you know, it was exciting to us to be able to put this together. What we tried to do was anticipate the inbound contributions based on the changes in the funding structure, as well as try and tie into what Chris has in his 10-year plan. And, you know, I think we've crossed over in a way that we understand we may be using slightly different assumptions, but the information is hopefully somewhat consistent. I'm looking back at Michelle and Deborah to make sure. So we were trying to correlate that way. But again, this just gives you a big picture of our situation this year, which is different than we've had before in terms of this net plus. In terms of the deferred compensation fund, I think this is the first time we've tried to show you something like this, where we're thinking about the Pension 2 program and what happens in that particular program in terms of inflows and outflows of resources. So again, you see the member contributions, the employer contributions, the anticipated investment return, some other funds that we gather from our compliance and compare programs. So that's really what that reflects. And then the operational budgetary cost, as well as what we see or anticipate in terms of benefit payments. And then this next slide is the health benefit plan, which reflects the fact that this is a zero net return. We're really in a pay-as-you-go basis here. So we just put enough in that plan to support the obligations of the plan in terms of payments going out. There is a slight operational cost to the administration of the plan, and so that's what you see reflected in the operational budget number. But again, the expectation is that we balance out to a zero net change. Then what we have here is more of the traditional display of the operational budget. This does not include the technology piece, so it really is what we typically think of as the traditional operational budget, and you can see the percentages there in terms of our distribution of expense across salaries and benefits. Our people are most important to the operation of the system, and you see that in terms of the budgetary focus. And then pro rata, which is coming across from our share of state spending, OTEC, facilities operations for this building, consulting and other professional services, which we use quite a bit of, and then the general expense categories that, you know, pays for operational needs. The next slide really talks about this new area of funding, which is a subset of what we call the support appropriation. So it is part of the legislatively budgeted process, but it is something that we've used, or we've created a structure now where we can use to fund a capital project, which is what Business Renew is ending up driving, so that we have funding that we can count on over a period of time to be used to pay for those capital investments. And so what you see here is the result of the BCP that we prepared for 14-15 and garnered your support for, and the money's coming into the system in those various fiscal years. Obviously, we will not necessarily be spending at this same rate, because part of what we've done is create an opportunity to reappropriate funds over an extended period of time so that we can control spending as we need to in reflection of the progress of the project. And I know Chris is going to go into some more details about how we're planning to do that, but really the concepts are that we will have an annual spending plan for the major system project, the pension solution project. We have a presentation scheduled in your board work plan for November to go over the first time reporting out of that. But given the scope of responsibility and project, we will in fact have an annual spending plan that reflects our intended use of this money. And we have created the mechanisms within BD to be able to do that, so that we can all be assured that the money that's getting released for spending is the right amount of money for that year, and that we have the ability then to retain money that we don't need to spend in a year for reappropriation in a subsequent period. So this last slide highlights how we're controlling the money. Again, the project funding, as I alluded to, will be allocated for expenses based on an EPIC-approved annual spending plan, something we would report to you as well. We have created budgetary controls around revenues so that we can make sure that what we expect to be coming in is in fact coming in. Obviously, that's something we want to be particularly aware of as our contribution rates have changed. We want to make sure that we're in fact seeing those contribution rates come in both at the macro level and the detailed level, and so we have those automated controls in place. And then we have a process where we work with various business areas on the quarterly projections. So where are we against the plan? What has occurred that is different than what we were intending? Where do we have extra resources? Where do we have resource limitations that we want to address? And so that's part of our process in terms of, in addition to the automated controls, we have a process of analytics and analysis in conjunction with our business partners to make sure that we're in the appropriate alignment. So that's what I had to share.
Questions or comments? Paul? Can you go back to, I think it was the first slide.
Yeah, the overall strip, yeah.
So investment return of 26 billion, and you said 12 of that is not cash
It's
flow.
unrealized.
Is unrealized. So 14 is cash flow. So if you take, basically, we have net inflow of 20 billion, but if you take 12 away from it, in terms of cash, we've got about 8 billion of net cash flow. Okay.
Yeah, so we're in a different, we've changed direction there.
Right. And maybe this is a question for Chris as well, but if we don't get to 7.5, does that more likely to eat into our unrealized or our realized investment return? Or if we do better than 7.5, I mean, or is it all proportional, or?
I'm gonna say because you realize when we make 7.5, portion of that is cash that we've booked profits, but a lot of it is unrealized gains and losses. So the cash flow from our investments, which are dividends, income, affect the cash flow most directly. But a good example would be, think about selling a big building in real estate. So we book a profit, we sell a big building, but we know we want to reinvest that into real estate. We count it into our cash flow and we anticipate it. But we always realize that they have the ability, and we probably want them to redeploy that unless we were over allocated. So it's kind of part of all the moving parts. When we underperform the broad market, we're still picking up the coupon income, and that mostly hits us on the unrealized side. Because as you can imagine, you're slow sometimes to take losses. If a building's, I'm going to pick on buildings or private equity, if a company is underwater for a period of time, you'll hold it longer till it comes back to a profit. So for us, the big numbers on this that really impact us are those member and employer contributions, and then the benefit payments. And that, we've had a negative $6 billion a year cash flow for a considerable period of time. We don't count, at the beginning of the year when we estimate our cash flow in the investment portfolio, we don't assume that we're going to make 7.5. We only just look at the cash we can kind of count on is going to come out of equity and dividends and income on the fixed income portfolio. So for us, we've been swimming against the tide, the current, for quite a few years. And even, we've looked at the next 10 years, benefit payments continue to grow, and even though the contributions increase, we will still have a negative cash flow for the next 10 years, easy. It'll drop for us from a negative 6 billion to probably about negative 4. So, the contributions as they step up over the 7 years really helps us. But we'll still have a headwind from an investment standpoint. And said another way, in all of your 401ks, your average cost buying all the time because you're putting money into the market, we're kind of in that retirement phase where we're required to take money out of the market every time period. And so we're a net sort of average cost seller. And as we've discussed in the investment committee, we time those sales. So we try to be smart about it. But that answer it? Long-winded?
No, it's very helpful. And but I mean, I guess my question is sort of, while we have this negative cash flow, it's not. Sounds to me like it's not. It doesn't get to the point where it's affecting our investment strategy because we're having to change the strategy to assure ourselves of the necessary liquidity.
I guess I would say in a way it does. That example of where you're a net seller. because we've been on the other side of that where you're constantly buying and you get to think about what's the best thing to buy. And now you're flipping around saying, what's the best thing to always sell? And what changed over the last couple of years is at our tactical asset allocation committee, we'd almost talk about cash flow at the end. Now we talk about it absolutely first. How much cash do we have, and do we have enough cash? You know, like the summer's a dry period for us. Teachers aren't contributing, so do we have enough to get through the summer? And how much do we need? And it does impact us from the standpoint, as I was discussing, when you think about longer-term investments, particularly real estate and private equity, that whether they're in a net buy or net sell mode really dramatically shifts our liquidity needs. So historically, let me go back. In the 80s and 90s, we had tried to pretty much run at below 1% cash position. Now we've been staying around 1.5 to 2 because we need that level of liquidity for the negative benefits. If you look at Robin's chart here, you know, because we don't assume that 26 billion of investment return, if you took that off, that's what you can see. That's sort of the checkbook. You know, they're doing the financial statements. We're sort of living the checkbook cash flow of paycheck to paycheck, and whether the check balance is high enough. It does affect us, but we're not, like you see in the asset allocation, we have not come to you and said, you got to raise cash to 2 or 3% of the fund.
So we do have about 7 billion of that 26 billion that's assumed to be the actual revenue coming back from dividends and,
Cash flow.
okay. So it does flip it from cash flow negative to positive as long as we're getting that revenue and contributions in, we're starting to cross the line. So the 26 billion includes 7 billion of dividends and other kinds of income that we should be, right. So if I just did the math here, it looks like we're on the positive, almost positive heading. You know, we might have some timing differences, but it's near net from a cash perspective.
I just appreciate the fact that both you and Chris are paying a lot of attention to this, so there aren't surprises, and that's the main message I think I'm getting here. I'm glad that, you know, Chris's committee thinks about cash flow, and I mean, that's just, you know, so that's good.
So again, you know, I'm very proud of staff. I mean, we're maturing in our capabilities in a whole different direction, and I just want to make sure that I'm overemphasizing that because this has been a long, hard road, and you know, I feel my body tingling here. You know, we're finally turning the corner to see the tangible outcome that is positive for us as an organization. So I can't say too much about the effort that's put in and my appreciation of that.
Tom?
Just thinking about other arenas and how they report, it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be too difficult to report to us quarterly about cash flow as well as results of operations and investment gains. And I think that'd be a helpful thing for us to keep in mind.
And I can say, yes, I think we can do that. We'll want to continue to develop our maturation there, but, you know, I think we can pull some things together, so.
Because that'll be an interesting barometer to keep in front of us as we go forward.
Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Robin.
The next item on our agenda is the CalSTRS business plan for 2014-15. We have Nancy Williams and Amy McDuff.
I'm gonna open this item up as the
Okay.
executives come to the table, and as to me, that becomes a big as well. This is the presentation of CalSTRS annual business plan. And as you recall, over late October or late of 2013 and early 2014, the board conducted a refresh of their strategic plan. And that strategic plan was adopted in April of 2014. We have a big group here. So the strategic plan was adopted in 2014. And then from that document, what we do is we pull the objectives and the initiatives that are going to be either initiated or completed or worked on in some variation during the current fiscal year, and add key activities that are driving those initiatives, and develop our annual business plan. So the annual business plan this year, the board had asked that we include some metrics to evaluate our performance and measure our performance relative to the annual business plan. And Amy McDuffie from Hewitt Innes Knepp worked with our executive staff to identify different measures to evaluate our performance. And she's going to be going over the process under which they've identified the metrics and answer any questions. The executive staff are here to answer any questions of any of the content of the annual business plan.
Thanks, Cassandra. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, it's good to see you all again today. And as Cassandra mentioned, we did last discuss this in October, and the direction at the time was that performance measures are a really good way to communicate desired outcomes under the strategic plan, and specifically the initiatives, because those are the things that are going on over a multiple year period, and you want to make sure that when you're getting progress reported on those, that it's against an outcome that you, the board, and the executive staff mutually agree to. So over the past several months, Nancy and I worked to develop a set of appropriate performance measures for each of the initiatives, and we sent those over to the executive staff, and I'm joined by a wonderful cast of characters this morning, so good to see all of you as well. And essentially they met and discussed all the performance measures that were provided, and then they refined those as appropriate and put the meat on the bone, if you will. So what you see in the business plan in front of you today is reflective of all those conversations and of that process. And I think a good example to look at would be page TRB 78. And you can see under each initiative it says measure, and so that's the specific measure. Sometimes there's two for each initiative, and we'd like to get your input and feedback on, are these the desired outcomes that you're looking for? Are there additional attributes you want to have incorporated? And I guess with that, I'd be happy to take any questions about the process, or executive staff would be happy to take questions, I'm sure, about their respective areas.
Are there any questions? Sure.
The only thing I would add, just a commentary, but obviously we went in literally a week before finishing the report with you with the changes at the Capitol to try and make this as fresh and reflective of where we are today. There's some introductory parts that are around the SWOT that reflect a different environment. So that part's not as current, but we tried to go in and obviously do a better progress check with you on the initiatives. But I sense there's probably still some retightening of some things based on the changes in our work objectives for the coming year.
Question from Paul?
So I'm on TRB 79 and Objective B with respect to investments, and this is a 5-year plan, right? Not a 1-year plan. So I'm a little explain the measures that basically measure A is earn an absolute return above 7.5% for the 5, 10, and 20-year periods ending June 30th, 2015. So we're supposed to earn 7.5% over a 20-year period, and we're in the 20th year of that period. It seems a little backward-looking rather than forward-looking. I'm not sure why we're focusing only on 1 year if this is a 5-year plan.
Sure, that's a great question, and I guess I'll start with the process side of it, then I'll flip it over to Michelle. But what we tried to do is recognize the fact that the board is already getting really good information on a lot of the areas under the strategic plan. And so where we could, we wanted to ensure that there was uniformity, that we weren't creating brand new performance measures where they weren't necessarily needed. So Michelle, maybe you want to talk about how that transpired through this measure.
And actually, the intention was for this to look forward and to, as Chris mentioned earlier, the 7.5 is for the very long term, and so that's why we added the, the 5, 10, and 20-year periods. And so that, that was really the intention for that measure, was to reflect the, the longer time period. So I guess I'm not quite sure I understand.
Well, my question is more why it's only for the period ending June 30th, 2015.
Because that's the time period reflected in this
In the
business
business plan.
plan. That's,
No, Paul, this is, I'm sorry, this is the annual business plan. It's extrapolated from the strategic plan, which is our 5-year plan, and this is what we identify as performing against for this fiscal year. So we pull the items that are gonna be worked on, initiated, completed, during this 14-15 fiscal year, and that's what and identify the key activities for the annual business plan.
I would just say, just think of it as your measurement period. It's defining what your measurement period is, which is every June 30th.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Okay, Amy? All right. There's no other questions.
Pieces of input, these will be the measures that will be used for this year's business plan, and you'll see them again in terms of reporting. Thank you.
Work on, thank you.
And we, Terry, we update these quarterly internally, and we do report to you and Sharon as the chair and vice chair at mid-year on the performance of these measures against the annual business plan. So it's something that we work all the way through the year, and you will see visibility of as we move forward continuously. Okay.
Yeah. Item 7, Jack, Chief Executive Officer's report.
Let me get my mic back on. You're really doing very well time-wise this morning. The investment committee is posted for 1:30, and I don't know if you want a break or you want to take them as we go along, but you're in good shape if you want it to be done with the board meeting certainly by 12:30. So we'll keep going, right? Yeah. Okay. Let me just wait till they get out the door here. And do you mind just putting up those 2 slides that I do have for the CEO report? If you still got those handy. Today we weren't going to go through the funding bill, and I know we just sit here and clap for 5 minutes. How about that? That's good. When people work this hard, it's really the first thing you do is sort of just sit back in your chair and you want that glass of Chardonnay and take a deep breath. We don't have Chardonnay for you today, but I think we're in the just let's take a deep breath and recognize what a great year it's been, and we'll come back in September and talk in a little more detail about the bill and all those things that go with it. There was a typo in your CEO report. That's why you have a new one. It's an important typo to correct. That's why I wanted to make sure I pointed it out, and we provided it update on the internet, and it's in the back of the room. But it revolved around that one sentence on the member contributions that we corrected. It unfortunately had a sentence similar to that for the employer contributions, that the prior rates would cease in 2046, and that's not the case for the member rates. So I want to make sure it's clean. On the CEO report, we produced that one pager that I saw Harry holding it up there. It's nice to have a quick guide to the rates and everything. It's on the website. We'll provide it to our stakeholder groups. I've already started using it in some presentations. And as you read through and think of things or get feedback, I'd love to hear more about things that we can communicate, that where you see there might be sticking points in communications around this or other things going forward. But I did want to show, again, I sent you this in a personal note, but again, I just want to keep recognizing the many people that worked inside the building. These are our employees that worked on the bill over 10 years, not just this year in it and in and out. But some of these people have been involved in weekly meetings for years, others have helped as the project took different twists and turn. And again, I think you can appreciate from a work ethic standpoint and commitment standpoint, when projects have definite finish lines and you're working around definite finish lines, there's a certain way you work. This one didn't have that clear finish line to it, other than we knew we had to get to the funding. But you have to stay on it, refocus, take detours, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't say enough for all these people in the building that were always on it, making sure with full energy that we would keep plowing ahead. There are many slides that could be made of all the people that didn't work at CalSTRS that contributed. So we have to be careful. This is not in any way a singular victory by the system. It's a victory shared by people that work in the administration, the legislative branch, and the people behind me in the stakeholder organizations, that absolutely every one of them pushed it through in the end, recognizing it was their priority. So there is a lot of celebration to share and ownership of the success among many people. I only want to show you one more slide that wasn't in your CEO report that I think is an important communication tool. As you think about stress points going forward, you saw some initial reaction at the closure of the budget from the schools, because let's remember that percentage, over the long term, 71% of the additional contributions do come from the schools for this funding package. Having said that, member contributions were raised in relation to the legal constraints that we had to raise them. So members stepped forward as much as they could to pay for this package. And as I've said a number of times, I think the administration's efforts on this and their final proposal for the change in the state contributions exceeded everyone's expectations. So this is a three-party deal, and the rest of it obviously needs to be provided by the schools. If I can just show two numbers on the far right, when we reach that 7th year of maturity, when the school contribution does reach 19%, I just think it's important when we talk with school officials and school boards that wonder how can we pay this much for a pension plan for teachers. We have to remind them that those school employees, those bus drivers, those cooks that also deserve a good pension, those contributions for their defined benefit plan are expected to be 20% of payroll. And, people argue whether this is a fair apples to apples comparison, but I think it is to really aggregate that with the Social Security contribution to actually say what's going into a person's total retirement security. Some people don't like that when I present it that way, but as you can see, when you add that additional amount, then the discrepancy is large. Now, in fairness to the other argument, schools, we take up the vast majority of that labor budget. I mean, if we translate that into dollars, there's no doubt about it. This has a highly disproportionate impact on the school budget because there's a lot more payroll going into our part of this than the CalPERS part of it. But on the relative rate basis, you can see these rates aren't far off. We're a bit under the CalPERS rates year by year. So I'm going to keep talking about that. And I think it's been refreshing that the media, who normally loves to cover these two systems in two different sets of stories always, I'm actually noticing some recent talks about the budget that they bring the rates together and talk about the total impact on schools, both for our part and the CalPERS part. And I think that's going to be an effective presentation to hear that together in a more holistic way when we effect that budget. But I'll make sure as we bring back to you an implementation plan, not only is there administrative issues that we have to address here relative to making sure things get done right. We've already sent out the employer directive, as we love to call them. So the money is starting to come in, reflecting the statutory rates. But I think there are some new communication responsibilities we might have here, just as I learned from where people are surprised or don't fully understand the system, that I want to think about that we can do better. Now we have a little more time to talk about the system. I think we can do better with some of the parties that we haven't always communicated as strongly with. So I'd like to see us having, as I said, new channels of communication beyond the stakeholder organizations that have always been our first colleagues in all that we do here. Okay, So that's all I had for today, really, on this, and we'll come back and have the Chardonnay and talk about it in September and all that kind of stuff, if that's all right.
Thanks. Thank you, Jack.
I think he's focused
Sharon?
on Chardonnay.
I'm kind of a Cabernet girl, so I'm hoping we have options. But two things. First, I presume when you say this in September, we're going to have some kind of. I guess it would be nice to be able to kind of sort of put a flag in the ground somehow and really kind of commemorate this accomplishment, because I feel like as a coming at the end of it, I do recognize there's board members, that were here 10 years ago and 8 years ago and 6 years ago that have worked hard on this. So I think it'll be great for us to do something like that. I wondered with this handout, I'm just wondering if, I know I get requests a lot of times from members about they're trying to disseminate information to their members and going to meetings and communicate with folks. And I did notice when this first came out, I remember going to the website and trying to download a PDF of the funding strategy to share with members. And I remember requesting it from Gretchen, and the staff was great about getting that out. But I just wondered if with major documents like that, if we can, is there an issue with us making a PDF available on the website for members? It is now. I guess what I'm saying is I've noticed that a couple of the documents like this, it's great because they're on our website and people can read them, but there's not always a way to download them. There's a way to share them on Facebook or tweet them or.
Is that way?
Okay.
Right. It's a lot of times on websites we have, there's just like a print icon, but I notice in ours, at least for this before you guys made the changes, you could share it with social media, but you couldn't necessarily download it in an easy way. And I just wonder if, not for every document, but it just seems like for documents like this that our members could use for chapter meetings or any kind of educational setting, it would be nice to have fact sheets like this, because I think our staff does such a great job of encapsulating really a lot of information on a a two-sided one-pager. It would be great to make more of that accessible and downloadable in a PDF version, or to be able to share it, because I was looking for that, and I appreciated the staff's responsiveness to making that happen, but I just wonder if we could do that on the website itself to make it easier.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Looks like Ed's good.
Seeing none. Ed Folia? Yeah. Welcome, Ed.
Ed Foley from CTA, NEA retired. Dave and I just returned from a representative assembly that was held by the NEA in Denver, Colorado, which is home territory for Jack. But the thing that I was extremely proud is, first of all, there's very few states that do not have an unfunded liability. I don't know of any state that took the leadership role to solve the problem like California has solved it. It was also noted at the Representative Assembly that we are so far ahead of what's happening in the rest of the country. And I think not only should we be talking about what's happening here in California and how we're funding it, but I think we need to also compare it how they're doing it in other states. I mean, I talked to retirees from Illinois, from Ohio, from New Jersey, and they are getting cuts. Their cost of living is gone down. So the thing is, if we didn't solve the problem this way this year, I'm afraid that many of our retiree members would have experiencing cuts. So directly we didn't get a benefit, but indirectly we did. Because now that you saved the system, we don't have to worry, even though we don't vest in the 2% each year for COLA. In essence, you're not going to take it away from us because you've already committed it to the others. So what we can, as retirees, we can look with satisfaction as we look at our other colleagues throughout the United States, that we solve the problem here. And I don't think we should keep it a secret. I think that, you know, in some of your publications and as you're comparing, you might mention what happened in New Jersey. You might mention what is happening in Illinois. I mean, I think we need to show what leadership really means and what when we have a courageous governor that's willing to go ahead and do this, and we know that in even implementing it, we're going to have some we're going to have some pushback and something. But I think what we need to do is say, listen, the state of California in 1913 made a commitment. And in 2014, we honored that commitment. And I think that there's plenty of evidence out there in the rest of the country to show that we were not talking out of both sides of our mouth. Thank you very much.
Very well said. Thank you.
Well said, sir. As usual.
Sharon?
I just wanted to comment too. I appreciate your comments, Ed, and share them. And I know you're right. I mean, look at Oklahoma, and there's lots of other places where things are really tough. And I just wanted to mention, Jack actually came. Our American Federation of Teachers is having a convention in Los Angeles, and Jack came, and Harry actually joined us for the dinner. I know there's been a lot of partnership with AFT and NEA nationally with retirement security issues, and Jack came and spoke to trustees that are all around the country on Wednesday and shared about the funding, kind of our funding solution. And I do think there were lots of questions from teachers from other states, and that the compare and contrast, I think, was challenging for a lot of them because of the political situation, or you have teachers that are appointed by a governor versus being elected. So there are a lot of dynamics and challenges for those trustees hearing about what we've done in California. And so it was great to have Harry there and give input and to have Jack talk about it. But I do think it kind of, for me, I know as a board member, it raised that issue of I think there were a lot of pieces that came together at the right time with the right folks to have us be able to resolve this in a way, and in some ways, some other states don't necessarily have that advantage. So I appreciate your comments, and I think even more so it undergirds, you know, like our research project for this year too, that there's a lot of work that we need to do to advocate for teachers' secure retirement around the country. And and I appreciate you coming, Jack. I think it was informative for a lot of the members to kind of hear what CalSTRS has done. So thanks.
Okay, is that it, Jack? All right. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is an information item as well. This is the Business Renew Oversight Assessment. A couple of folks coming up, Chris and Deanna. Chris, are you going to introduce Deanna? I think
Yes.
she's new to the committee.
Good morning. I'd like to start out. Graham is on a plane coming back from the UK right now, so that's why his site manager, Diana Acuff, is here to give the presentation on behalf of Grant Thornton. She's been with them for a number of years and is really knee-deep into a lot of the activities that we're doing here, so she can have a lot of valuable information for you.
So first I want to start off with saying you're not going to get the beautiful British accent from me. I've tried. I've been practicing for 2 weeks. Won't even attempt to insult my boss that way. So to start off, get the clicker. We're going to start with pension solution. So the pension solution final proposals were received. We have 4, which is a very, very good result. During the month of June, Oversight observed the final pieces of preparation for the receipt of those proposals. We have also observed and we're following the resolution of some governance planning and some schedule management planning. So the importance of the schedule management planning and the governance planning for the health of the program as a whole was of vital importance to make sure that the projects will be healthy going forward and that governance plans can be properly executed. So we've observed this. We feel like they are heading in the right direction. They've definitely made a lot of ground, and we feel they're very healthy in that area at this time. As far as the evaluation process, everything is going according to plan. Obviously, I can't give you as much information as I would like at this point because of the confidential nature of the procurement. We don't see any risks at this point that we need to raise a red flag to, and I know Chris has more information about the procurement process as it's going on. One risk that we do see on the near front is in relation to the organizational change management. There is a strategy in place to mitigate this risk, and that is that they are bringing more resources on. Right now, they have one resource scheduled to begin at the end of the month and another in process. I don't know what the actual begin date will be, but it's close. So the importance of making sure that the organizational change management pieces are in place before the vendor gets on board will basically set the standard and the tone for the success of the project as you move forward. So we're very interested in watching those pieces as a program, not just as a project. Our goals over the next few months are to continue to observe the evaluation process. They have vendor demonstrations beginning in September, so those are going to be very interesting, and we're looking forward to observing those. And we're looking forward to how the governance processes and planning actually hits the implementation phase of that. Now, we've seen pieces of it started to be implemented over the past month, so we're looking forward to how they continue the progress in that area. So, do you have any questions on this?
Just linking it back to your work plan, remember this is with the idea that the destination is bringing this back to you for a vote in February, give or take a few days, depending on how the evaluation finishes. But that's the current target, is to get through all that evaluation process of those bids that I mentioned by February. Oh, okay. There you go.
Thanks, Jack.
I didn't know that was your slide.
Good bridge.
So I thought we'd take a moment here because we've actually hit a second big milestone. So CalSTRS has had a pretty successful June and early July. We solved the funding strategy, first huge milestone for us. So second milestone for us is having the 4 proposals received for this procurement. And really for a large IT procurement, especially in the public sector, to get 4 comprehensive proposals of this is a huge success. And it really sets us up to have a really competitive best value evaluation for our final selection. And really, this couldn't have been done without the work of a lot of people within the organization. We have a lot of people within CalSTRS that participated in this whole procurement and RFP development process. But there's a few people I'd like to point out specifically because they really went over and above the required work. And that's our business lead, Kathy Kalis, the project manager, Sue Ziegler, Lisa Blacknick, our director of procurements, and Pua Mua, who is our procurement analyst that works for Lisa, and finally Lamont King from our general counsel's office. Those people were like the core procurement process team, and they really made sure that this process stayed on track and really provided a well thought out RFP and evaluation process that we'll be going into that's going to really give us a successful result. So coming up as far as the evaluation phase, just at a high level, we're currently finalizing the pre-qualification evaluation right now. We hopefully will be able to start the technical evaluations next week if we get through the pre-quals. That'll be followed, run through August, and then we'll go into, there's 2 phases of technical evaluation. The first phase is actually evaluation of the proposals themselves, which will be followed by a down select where we will identify who will follow into the phase 2 of the technical evaluation, which will include, as Diana mentioned, site visits, those are customer site visits to talk to proposers' customers, how well did these products work for you, how well did the vendor work with you. Solution demonstrations, the evaluation team will get to see the proposed solutions and have them demonstrated to them to see if they match up with what is proposed in the written proposals. and then interviewing the key personnel that will be working on the project. So the executive teams from the proposal vendors, the project management teams, those are going to be key people that make sure that this is successful as we go into implementation. And then kind of going parallel with that will be the cost evaluations that will be going on at the same time as the second phase of that. And at the completion of those two, we'll go into the best and final offer negotiations with the final selections of up to 3. So we can go up to 1 to 3 vendors that we can have a final negotiation period with. And then that kind of gets, as Jack says, hopefully to get us to the point where we're targeting bringing it back to you with a selection by February. And we're also at the same time, for the beginning of this fiscal year, this is going to be the first year, as Robin alluded to a little bit in her budget slides, we'll be starting to bring on those number of staff coming on to get ready for the implementation phase of this project. So this fiscal year we anticipate bringing in between 40 and 50 additional staff to ramp up to work with the vendors as we start implementation activities. And we're also working closely with the financial services and Robin's team on how we're going to manage the spending plan and the budget and reporting to you so we can have really accurate financial reporting on this budget as we go forward. And Robin will have a little bit more detail on that at the November meeting, as she alluded to. Any questions before we move to data prep?
One, Chris, just hold on a second. Sharon?
Chris or Robin, I don't, so when you talk about additional staffing needs, I'm just kind of curious, how do we, because I know we're talking about this a little bit with the investment area too, just, are you going to give us more information in September or November about staffing needs and how we're, what that looks like?
Projected staffing in the budget change proposal that we submitted and got approved through the legislative budget process. What we're working out is the actual spending plan for the year and how we make sure that that aligns with the actual activities that are going to occur during the year, and then compare that to our projections so that we could come to you if there are any significant issues we are facing in that regard. You know, obviously we did the budget change proposal in the absence of a cost bid from an implementation vendor, so there are obvious opportunities for us to be wrong. I mean, I think the only thing we know is that we'll be wrong. It won't be the exact number, but whether that creates an issue or not, until we have that information as well as more details in terms of the spending plan.
In the spending plan approach, as Robin alluded to, now that we have more information from proposals, as we get more implementation, even in the phased implementation that we get, the selected vendor will have more finite information as far as resources that we can revise on an annual basis. It's hard to project out 5 years what we're going to need, you know, specifically per year. So this process will help us be more finite on our estimates for how we're going to use those resources.
I'm curious, are we looking at hiring new staff, or are we taking our current staff and saying, you're working on the pension solution project, or how? I guess I'm just trying to understand how we're looking at the staffing piece. When we talk about additional staff, what does that mean?
The positions that were included in the budget proposal, the way we envision it, and Peggy's talked about this before, is we really anticipate getting our best and brightest folks to work on the project and then backfilling behind them. And Peggy can probably add a little bit more from the major impact from her organization.
So the strategy that we've put in place already is to start positioning people to be successful in the project and making sure that we have good policies and procedures well documented so that we can bring in staff. And when you think of things, you usually think of a cascade as moving down. Well, we're kind of reversing that, and we're doing our cascade up. So we'll be taking a smaller number of people directly from the business who going through a competitive selection process, obviously, but who have programmatic knowledge and can focus specifically on the project. And they will be part of the project core team assigned full-time to the project. We'll fill behind those individuals in the business areas, but probably not at that same level. We'll provide an opportunity for someone else to have stepped up into the positions vacated for those permanent core team positions. In addition, we're anticipating a robust opportunity for subject matter experts in the various discipline areas. And that will vary based on which phase of the project we're in and what our functional rollout will include. And it won't just be my area, it will be many areas in the organization who will be doing this. And in anticipation of that, will be the plan is for us to add some additional bench strength to those business areas so that as bits and pieces of people get pulled out to be subject matter experts, we're able to maintain our customer service obligation, because during this project, the expectation is that we will continue to pay benefits on time and to meet our performance and service objectives and not have that impact on our customer service. I mean, we're very focused in on the maintenance of customer service during the project so that it's as seamless to the membership as possible. And in particular, we don't want it to result in the disruption of the payment process.
Those are my concerns. So
Thanks.
Thanks, Megan.
Paul, did you have questions?
Well, I had questions.
Just buzz in there and I'll get you back.
I had questions.
There you go.
I had questions about data prep. Are we going to talk about?
That's
Okay,
nice.
okay.
Can I slip in one more question, comment about the budget then? Just, so this project isn't special in that regard. They went through the traditional budget building process we do, and I just want to make sure, again, it would be chaotic if different branches had different timelines around their budgets. So again, the cycle for you is generally right now in the organization, actually the past 2 months, the different branches, including investments, has gone through and analyzed their needs and put in requests to us in the budget office, myself, the executive staff, to think about that. So back to investments, I don't remember how many Chris requested, 10 or so positions. So that would normally that will come to you, not normally, in September for feedback. And then you finalize a budget in November. So I hope we can always keep the whole organization on that same cycle ideally, so everyone's on equal footing for competing for resources doing that. And this project wasn't any special in that regard. What's nice is it went through the legislative process and it's approved, so now is the game. This is a little trickier since we're rotating chairs in the building. So it's not like just hiring new people, as Peggy very alluded. It'll be real complicated who gets, but we're excited because, one thing that is true for our staff, we're a large organization, but we're not a huge organization in state government. I mean, if you compare us to Franchise Tax Board or Department of Transportation, you're dealing with tens of thousands of employees. So we've got a good organizational culture here around people that want to stay here for their career, but we're not so big that the career development ladder is as tall as it should be. So what's nice about this project, it's going to change the nature of a lot of positions and offer people in the building new jobs and new ways of being with us. So I know we've not done as well as we could have around career development. I'm hoping this project is part of that solution for the staff. And so that's exciting.
I also want to just have you recognize that we didn't create our staffing expectations in a vacuum. They were discussed in detail with all of the responsive business areas, and we have actually a chart that's probably about as big as the screen behind you that maps out how many resources by business area we think we'll need for each year of the project. And that includes where we'll need full-time people and part-time people. So there was a lot of effort that went into getting this right. We certainly learned the lessons or absorbed the lessons from some of the critiques that have taken place about other state large IT procurements. And one of the things that we recognized from that is that adequate resourcing for projects is a problem. And we wanted to avoid that, so we tried very hard to be realistic. As Robin mentioned, it's not science, there's art involved. And so there may be a need for some additional flexibility in that staffing component, but we think we have a very good base to work from, and it's based on our ability to predict to the best of our ability what the impact will be and what we'll need to retain in business areas in order to keep core business operating.
Thanks, Rob. Chris, back to you.
Moving on to the data prep project. So the data prep project is currently behind schedule. They have put in measures in place to bring it back on schedule. However, that has caused a slight reduction in scope for a few lesser priority items that they didn't feel, or they have found through analysis, that the depth of analysis wasn't going to give the benefit that was originally intended. So well, it sounds bad, it's not. Actually what it is they're saying, we identify for some pieces of scope that we know what we need to know, we need a little more analysis, but we won't get benefit from spending a lot of time on them because they're pieces that just don't need that depth. So they've prioritized, they've put in measures to evaluate what pieces need the depth and which don't. Those pieces that have the biggest impact to obtain the project goals have been put as the highest priorities. So the goals of the project appear to be able to be obtained with the scope that they're looking at right now. And Chris is going to talk further about that. Our concern initially, and when we were first writing these slides, was that the scope wasn't going to be fulfilled with a proper amount of quality with the aggressive schedule that was on the plate. The prioritization of those items appears, and I'm going to use the word appears because until we see it actually completed, we won't know for sure, appears to have mitigated that risk. That being said, there is still risk. There is risk that the schedule is aggressive, but that risk mitigation also has a contingency plan that Chris is going to give you a little more information about. So what is very vital at this point is that the schedule be maintained as it is. It looks healthy right now. Over the past week and a half, 2 weeks, they have been able to pick up the pace and get things through the pipeline as intended by the new prioritization. The knowledge transfer that's going to be occurring over the next month and a half is vital to the success of CalSTRS taking this analysis and moving forward with it, and vital to CalSTRS being able to pick up any pieces that they want to analyze further after this phase of the project is completed. Oversight's goal over the next few months while this project or this phase of the project is wrapping up is to continue to monitor that the quality is being delivered. So what we aren't worried about is that every individual item is delivered exactly at the minute it was scheduled to be delivered. We are worried that the intent of the analysis is delivered, so meaning that you get what you need from the analysis. And that's what we're focusing on for the next month and a half. The schedule at the moment has the reports beginning to be written, and a draft of one of the reports will be delivered next week to CalSTRS. That's of vital, importance because that shows us what is actually going to be coming down the pike and what that quality is going to look like. So I know the CalSTRS staff has done an amazing job of making sure that they're paying attention and available to analyze and give any kind of business and SME support that the schedule or that the project has asked for. As they move forward, that's going to continue to happen. There is a little intersection between the evaluation team that's now being tasked to work on the pension project. So there's slight, resource risk there, but I think that they have all worked it out enough to ensure that they have moved all the bricks around so that everyone is available where they need to be. We will be continuing to monitor that risk as well. So, Paul, did you want to ask your question now, or did you want to wait until after Chris has gone through? Okay.
Oh, so didn't get my regular slides. So just a little bit more on the mitigation and contingencies around this. So as Diana mentioned, one of the first things we did was we really reevaluated the prioritization of the remaining issues that were on the table and really focused on the ones that were the biggest risk and most had the biggest impact to the conversion for the pension solution project. And that's to put those in priority order. Prior to that, we were really looking at addressing these issues from a benefit stream perspective, from when benefit starts to end. And this actually, it takes a longer time to do it that way, but this way, changing the approach to doing it from a priority perspective actually was a lot more efficient. And the quality has not, from my discussion with both the project team and the vendor team today, said the quality has not suffered from that change in approach, which is good to hear. It also aligns us with what's our really focus on what's the overall goal of this, and that's really to get some information available from when we get into negotiation periods, because the data conversion is just a big unknown as far as size and complexity. So as much information as we have on that when we get into vendor negotiations, that gives us a little bit more information to discuss with the vendors around cost of conversions, because they're going to build in a lot of costs around the unknowns. As much as we can streamline that as possible, this will be very helpful. So despite all the work we're doing on mitigation, I'm never comfortable with mitigating, because tomorrow we can have a major problem with resources. So what do we do about contingencies? So we've identified as a contingency plan, if we have to replace the vendor or the vendor, is unable to complete their work, we have identified internal resources that complete this work. It would require a little bit of a schedule extension, but the schedule extension would still take us out and complete the analysis and get us the information we need for the negotiation period before that begins. So the resources we've identified, as Diana had talked about, I think we've identified ones that would not be as significantly impacted from implementation of the new funding legislation or some of the other critical items that we have going now. So I think we're over the hump right now as far as what those resource risks would be. So right now we're trending to beat that, to get that going. So just a couple pictures. So the remaining issues that we have on the plate were really broken out into basic issues, which are kind of like, incorrect birth dates, et cetera, versus a complex, which is things like exceptions and overrides. Those are kind of the two buckets that are being worked right now. So just to kind of give you a picture where we're at, the blue line that shows up here, I'm sorry, I apologize for the visibility, but we just got this information this morning. That's kind of the trend we need to do to complete by the end of the month, to put all the issues. The red line on the bottom is where we were trending before we added additional resources and reprioritized and took the new mitigation approach. And as you can see, the green line is kind of what we have remaining. So by the mitigation strategies we've implemented, you can see that it's back on target to meet our end of July date for completion of the analysis. And then the remaining month of August would be to finalizing the reports that would come out of that, which is the real value that we need here. Same thing with the complex issues. So blue line is the target, what we're trying to get to. The red line is where we were trending, and since we implemented our mitigation strategies, you can see that it's getting closer to target. In fact, right now we're almost on target for completion by the end of August. So with that, I'm open to any questions. Paul, do you still have questions?
Right,
Thank you. So I'm glad to hear that, there's the problem sort of forced a reconsideration and maybe a better solution. I mean, that's kind of, if that's the way it turns out, that's great. But I wonder why are we forced to change? I guess I don't understand. I'd like a little assistance on understanding how we contract with these vendors for this, because was this a problem that was caused by CalSTRS, and therefore the vendor doesn't have a responsibility to deliver what was initially contracted for, or was this a problem with the vendor, in which case it would seem to me that they should fix it. We shouldn't be forced to change the scope of what we had contracted for.
Would you like to answer first? You want me to go first? My response to that would be, we have to look at this from two perspectives. If we have a project perspective and we have some specific project objectives that we need to meet and timelines. So like I was referring to, one of the first real data points we need to come out of this is having information when we go into the negotiation period. In order to meet that timeline, we can't be dependent on the vendor to perform their duties, because we have no control. If they can't perform, we're stuck without having that information. So while we are holding them to their contract responsibilities to deliver, and by the approach that we're taking, they've also added additional resources. And the resources that we've added isn't to replace theirs. It's just we really refocus the resources from our responsibilities on the project. But we still are holding them to perform. If they do not perform by the end, then they will not get paid for the deliverables for this. This is a deliverable-based contract. So if they do not perform, they do not get the benefit of the bargain or the benefit of the contract. But the bigger risk to us is if we don't have that data, we lose that data point going into negotiations, which is a bigger risk for us going forward. Yes, because this is really supportive of the pension solution data.
Can we go back a couple of slides to where you list the mitigations? Yeah, one forward. Yeah, there we go. So why is the contingency then? One of the contingencies, the requirement of additional CalSTRS resources, or that there will be if things aren't completed by the end of the contract, that will require work by CalSTRS staff? Why isn't it the vendor's responsibility for deliverables, even if it extends beyond the contract term?
That would be the first approach that we would take, but we can't force a contractor to come in here and do the work if they don't meet their deliverable and they've decided, because part of their concern is deliverable-based contract. If they decide that they're spending more than what this contract is worth to them, and it'd be more efficient for them to stop work than to continue work, we have no control over that. That would be our preferred approach, but I'm looking at worst-case scenario from a contingency perspective. If they're not willing to cooperate and finish that role, then we have to be able to finish the project.
The contingency bullet, that is for if the contractor is not able to fulfill their contract, and then we would step in to fulfill the terms of what the deliverable would be, correct? I mean,
And there would be legal implications for the vendor.
right.
I mean,
So-
that we need to add the
Right.
sentence here.
Yeah.
Say, please do it, and if they say no, we say, okay.
Right.
That's right. Okay, just let's make sure we're saying that second part here.
And since we used my favorite word, let me just jump in there. That would be legal. I think what Chris is presenting in an answer to your question, Paul, is he's basically saying they still have to do the deliverables, but there's so many contingencies. If they don't do it on time, we have to jump in and take over, but that doesn't relieve them of any of their responsibilities under the contract.
That's correct. That's why I was separating the project risks and issues from the contracts issues.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Seeing any? Okay. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Diana. Item 9A is the approval of the June 5th minutes. Chance to take a look at those. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval?
Moved by Dana to approve. A second? Second by Grant. All those in favor of approving the June 5th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 9B is board member education. Questions, comments? If not, move approval of this. Item 9B.
Move approval?
Moved by Dana, seconded by Grant. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Thank you. Are there any committee reports from appeals? Do we have appeals report? You have it, Michelle?
Today,
Nothing?
I mean, we took action on the proposed administrative decision, but I don't have that.
Okay. Maybe this is. Thanks, Mary.
Always comes in at the right time.
I was chatting with her, what can I
You
say?
know how my life works.
Here it is, Harry.
I want
Right?
Mary. I want her in Los Angeles.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, so 10A is the appeals. You want to buzz in, Michelle?
I just moved it.
Okay. Michelle's moved approval of the appeals committee report from July 11th, 2014, from earlier today. A second?
Second.
Seconded by Dana. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. 10B. Yep. Brian, go ahead.
I was just concerned that there was the item I was handed has a closed session on the second page. And, okay, you have separate, okay.
Investment Committee from June 6, 2014.
Move adoption?
Okay, Dana's moved adoption of the Investment Committee from 2004, from, what's the date on it? June 6, 2014. The second?
Second.
Seconded by Joy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Item 11 is the items referred to committee for board decision. Jennifer, I don't think there were any. Okay. Item 12, new business items, review of information requests. No information requests. Item 13, the draft agenda for September. If you take a look at it, it's
We'll just have to change that a bit to reflect the change in the work plan you did earlier today.
right. Okay. All right. Um, Item 13A is any comments or statements from the public? Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Ed?
Ed Cohen, CTA, and retired. I realize that this might sound like a broken record.
Some records are worth
I want to
repeating.
remind the board that we are now entering the 32nd month that we do not have a retiree sitting amongst you. Considering all the things that are happening to our retirement system, not to have a representative who is living what you are carrying out on that board as a voting member is really a sad situation. Now, I just praised the governor a few minutes ago, but I also recognize no one's perfect. But I would ask each and every one of you, if you have any opportunity, any time that you can say something and remind the governor's office that they have really a responsibility. Also, with the passage of the unfunded liability issue, the school boards, they don't have a representative. And we're asking them as districts to implement something that we just passed, a very historical document, and they're not represented. So it's not only the retirees, you have another colleague that you should have on the board representing the interests of the school districts. And so, again, I know I just wanted to make it as a matter of record that has been brought to your attention again, even though you can't make that appointment. But there are 10 bright people up here that have a lot of influence in this state. I think that you perhaps maybe could get the word to the governor. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we will adjourn out of open session with